It's time now for Keeping It Real with Ollie Gann. Brought to you by Cuck's Farm Service on Magic 105.5 WMGH. Now, here's your host, Ollie Gann.
You and I are not here by mistake. We didn't come into existence by some game of chance. We were created on purpose. We have been sustained for a reason. As the Bible declares, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. These great plans can, but usually don't involve monetary gain or an abundance of resources. These plans usually do involve the strengthening of one's character. I believe today's returning special guest, Tatiana Harmer, is gonna attest to that. Speaking of which, did you catch the show with her last week? If not, I greatly urge you to take a listen to it at KIRradio.com. Her further testimonials today of her adoption experience from Moldova, where she experienced unimaginable abuse, to her receiving Christ as Savior at age 7 in New Jersey, to now interning at a local school district here in Schuylkill County, all have played a part in God's personal plans for her.
I'm so confused. I know I heard you loud and clear, so I followed through. Somehow I ended up here. I don't wanna think, I may never understand that my broken heart is a part of your plan. When I try to pray, all I got is hurt and these 4 words. Thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. I know you're good, but this don't feel good right now. And I know you think of things I could never think about. It's hard to count it all joy, distracted by the noise, just trying to make sense of all your promises. Sometimes I gotta stop, remember that you're God and I am not. So thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. Like a child on my knees, all that comes to me is thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will. I know you see me, I know you hear me, Lord. Your plans are for me, goodness you have in store. I know you hear me, I know you see me, Lord. Your plans are for me, goodness you have in store. So thy will
Okay, and the song we just heard is called Thy Will by Hillary Scott. And I want to thank you all so much for tuning in again today here to KIR Radio, as well, of course, here to Magic 105.5 WMGH, as we've got Tatiana Harmer in studio with us again here today, 2 weeks in a row. Thank you so much for coming back in. And just real quickly, before we kind of get into the line of questioning I had here for you today, do you think, or has there been any way that God's worked in your life, even from last week when we did the show to this week?
Absolutely.
Okay.
God is constantly always at work in my life.
Specifically, can you narrow it down to, or get specific with one aspect or one area of your life?
Okay, so there is a particular friend of mine who we recently just reconnected, and she heard the show, and she just messaged me and said, I just wanted to let you know how much of an encouragement was to hear you share your story and how thankful she was that God brought us back together. And this is a woman who isn't necessarily a believer and has had immense, you want to talk about a lot of struggles in her life. And to hear her say that she thanked God for bringing us back together as friends and hearing that testimony, it was a nice reminder, that Lord's working in those small ways even when you might not be aware of it.
And I tell you what, I will tell you very straightforwardly that is a real encouragement to me. Because I get on this track sometimes where I get into thinking, is anything good going on? I get into doubting a lot. And then the Lord kind of has to speak to me or tweak me or do what he needs to do in my heart to kind of remind me, yes, I'm working, I'm faithful, So that's another one of those times. Just hearing you emphasize that is just such an encouragement just to even me. I didn't even know that was coming as I asked that question. I was thinking some kind of general answer, and you got really right to it. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Outside of your salvation experience, what would you say has been the biggest blessing of God in your life?
Well, ironically enough, probably back to the last show would be my adoption, particularly how that came about, which I didn't get a chance to share last week.
Okay, well, please share now.
Sure, absolutely. So the group of children that were grouped into being able to be adopted were children who had medical issues that were not operable in Moldova. And European medicine is generally about 40 years behind that of the U.S. So a simple surgery here in the States is not so simple over there. So back in the 80s when I was born with crossed eyes, and it's a very quick and easy fixable surgery here, but over there it was not. And so I was grouped into that group of children who were viable for adoption. And so ironically enough, this physical deformity that kind of probably landed me with being abandoned and orphaned actually ended up being my ticket to the States and my ticket home. And so I think of that, and I'm thankful that the Lord used that to bring me here.
The picture that I just got with that is that while so many people, fallible human beings, looked upon you, or seemingly looked upon you with a defect or less than, God looked at you with, I've got something really great in store for you. He looked at you with, there's something really good here. And that's the way how, of course, that God doesn't just look at you that way. He looks at all of us that way. And what an encouraging word that is. We talked about, as you mentioned in the last show, all the blessings of you having been adopted. Was there ever a time when you regretted having been adopted, say maybe like in your teenage years or even in your young adult years when you were an adolescent or something like that? Was there ever a time or a stretch of time, a season in your life where you thought, I just wish, why couldn't I be like most other kids, just have that biological mom or dad or mom and dad? Did that ever go through your mind?
Oh, more times than one.
Okay.
Yeah, there were definitely quite a few seasons in my life where I hated that label of being adopted. And I mentioned, I think last week, kids can be cruel. And so, I got made fun of for being adopted. I got told like, oh, you were adopted because your mom didn't love you and she gave you up. And now you're, somebody else had to kind of take you. And those words hurt, even though I think in my heart I knew that wasn't true.
Right.
But words are very powerful.
Sure.
And I think in my teenage years, it was just that, that awkward period where you're really trying to figure out who you are. And it's just another issue you have to deal with. You can't just be a normal kid. You've got that extra label on you again. In my adult years, probably not so much. I think as I've gotten older, I've come to really love and embrace the fact that I'm adopted.
Did you start getting maybe immune to some of those battle scars?
I did, yes. I think I grew a bit of a backbone as I got older, and I just realized that people are going to say things out of fear or out of jealousy or whatever, and you just you get to understand that those hateful words or those hurtful words really aren't towards you. It's an issue with the person who's saying them. You just learn to shrug it off and brush it off and say, you know what, that's your opinion and you're welcome to it, but I know the truth.
Yeah. Well put. And I will probably take that a step further, and when we bring our faith into it, or when someone really has an outspoken faith in Jesus Christ, then that adds a whole nother element. And when people are spiteful or hateful or whatever, I am a big believer in believing that a lot of that has to do with our faith. And it's not that they have an issue with us, they've got an issue with him.
Yeah.
Jesus even prophesied of that. He said, look, be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me long before it hated you.
Yeah.
So got a lot more to come with you here, of course. I want to encourage all of you out there listening, keep it here to Magic 105.5 as well as to KIR Radio, because we've got a lot more with Tatiana Harmer, including a lot of good music to come as well from Capital Kings, Christine DeMarco, and Cutlass and Colton Dixon. So please keep it locked here.
Of my days, but the truth is I don't know where I let you go and lost my way. Said it would never happen, then walked at the door, yeah, once again. Can't even start to imagine a life without you, I can't understand. Can't believe I lost my way, tell me that it's not too late. Gravity, come do your thing, cause I can't trust these broken wings. I'm falling into your arms again. Into your arms again, I'm falling to where it all began, where it all began. Call it my only shot, cause you're the only hope I got. No looking down, I'm jumping off head first. I'm falling, falling into your arms again, into your arms again. Breathing in the air, nothing can compare to a new sunrise. Looks bright. Said it would never happen, then walked at the door, yeah, once again. Can't even start to imagine a life without you, I can't understand. Oh, can't believe I lost my way, tell me that it's not too late. Come do your thing, cause I can't trust these broken wings. No. I'm falling into your arms again, into your arms again. I'm falling to where it all began. Down, I'm jumping off head first. I'm falling into your arms again, into your arms
again. Okay, and this is Keeping It Real. I'm your host, Ollie G, and I am back with Tatiana Harmer, who has had an amazing story thus far, and I have no doubt she's going to continue to enlighten, impact, challenge, and encourage all of us, as I know she has me, not just even as we've done last week's show, but just also off air. It's been a real treat to talk to you and get to know you.
Thank you.
The tune we just heard was Into Your Arms by Capital Kings, and a song that I think of how when you left the orphanage in the former Soviet Union, and then you got saved at age 7, you really fell into the loving arms of Jesus Christ. And you mentioned that last week, that's when you got saved at age 7, when you were living with your adopted parents in New Jersey. An incredible story. But as incredible as that is, again, I want people, I think, to have some kind of understanding that this wasn't just like some kind of fairy tale story, you know. There were so many bumps and bruises and headaches and hardships and emotional scars along the way that just go beyond comprehension. What had been the hardest part about growing up after everything that had happened to you as a child?
I think, like I mentioned last week, finally coming to terms and understanding in regards to the abuse and having to compartmentalize and digest all of that. And really how I saw myself, how I thought other people would see me if I shared about it. It was something that I did not talk about. It was a battle that I faced on my own for a long time. I think I was afraid of hurting people by telling them. I wasn't sure how they would respond, particularly my parents. I didn't want them to take anything personally. Obviously, it was out of their control.
So they didn't know either?
They did not know.
Okay. So you kept this under lock and key for a long time.
For a long time, yeah.
And so you had this stuffed and crammed on the inside. And just to review for everyone that in case you didn't catch last week's show, which I again urge you to do so, you said that the abuse was all
across
over the place,
the board,
right?
yeah.
This wasn't just verbal or just physical. This
Nope.
was sexual. This was everything,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Go ahead.
And I think as I had to learn how to deal with that, and because I didn't feel I was able to share, I struggled with thinking, oh goodness, I feel like I'm broken, I'm scarred, I'm tarnished. I wasn't sure how to even love myself, let alone how could I let somebody else love me, particularly when I would get to the age of getting married or dating or however that comes along, whether or not I would be able to love or accept the love of a man. And then I figured, okay, maybe this happened because I'm just going to be single. And I think that kind of made me bitter inside because I'm thinking, here this has happened to me. I didn't have a choice. And this is maybe how my life is going to end up because of, you know, something that was done to me all those years ago. And I had to really come to the Lord and say, okay, I don't know how to deal with this. And you've allowed this to happen in my life. And I'm at that point, I'm still working through the anger and the hurt with him. And he's sending people into my life unknowingly who have spoken truth to me in kindness. Other people who have experienced similar things, even though I didn't share it at that point, to show me that you can be redeemed and healed, and that scar and that tarnish, as I saw it, doesn't have to remain that way.
So it took a spiritual breakthrough
Yes.
that the Spirit of God initiated in your life in order for you to have the emotional and mental breakthroughs that you needed to be
Yes.
comfortable in sharing it and be comfortable around other people. And then the prospect of getting into a relationship, which we are going to get into because you are definitely in a relationship now that I want you to definitely have plenty of opportunity to share about that. But it took God to really get this rolling for you and to get this out from under lock and key for you.
He had to break down those walls for me.
When did that happen?
I built up those walls over quite a few years. I think the major breakthrough probably happened around 25, 26.
Okay.
I was single at that point and was probably figuring I was going to be single for life. And I was coming to the terms, all right, accepting maybe that's where the Lord was calling me, even though my heart yearned to be in a relationship. I yearned to be married. I yearned to be a mom one day. But I figured maybe that just wasn't what that was for me. But it had to be that breakthrough of me trusting God and saying, I don't understand what your plan is, but I'm going to trust in it. And, you know, thy will be done. And then in that point, then he started moving other parts of my life and eventually, you know, brought my current boyfriend into my life. And here we are.
Okay. You're now 30 years old. Okay. How do you think the Lord has used all of these hardships, especially the abuse and all of that? How has he used all of those hardships, all of the tough stuff you've gone through for your good? How has it helped shape your current testimony?
Oh, wow. Well, it's shaped it in the fact that I have a different understanding and perspective of life than maybe someone who hasn't gone through that. And not to say that just because somebody hasn't gone through abuse that their perspective isn't valuable in their own right. But I think for me, it's helped me to connect with people who are hurting in a different way, to be able to express that compassion or that empathy on a different level. In some ways, it's made me a little more, I don't know, like steel. I think in some ways it's made me tough, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because it hasn't made me unfeeling in the toughness, but it also has shown me that, you know, life isn't always going to be easy, but that doesn't mean that you just give up and quit. You pick yourself back up and you keep going, because this life is the only one you've got when you're here on earth, and you can either choose to remain embittered and angry and entrapped and imprisoned by that anger or that hurt, or you can let that go and live this life and the blessing that it is.
Yeah. I would describe it, and I have before in the past here on the air, as you being someone who has probably a pretty strong resolve. Or to put that more in street lingo terms, you've got thick skin.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in such a manner where that just kind of happens on accident or it happens kind of on its own. It doesn't transpire that way.
No.
It transpires through the events, through the trials, through the things, the tough things that we go through, that God uses to, again, shape our character, which was the reason behind that question. Because there's no doubt about it, you've gone through your fair share of stuff. I've mentioned some things that I've gone through. Other guests that have been on here, or other people that have incredible testimonies, especially of faith in Christ, but then they're able, I mean, it's amazing how some people have been on the verge of death, or being on the verge of being killed, and then they're alive or still living today to talk about it. All different things that God's used in the life of a person. When I think of your story, the stuff that you went through in the first 4 years of your life would probably be just about enough to do any kid in, you know?
Yeah, probably.
But somehow, again, when we're talking about your plans, personal plans, the personal plans of God that I want to emphasize in bold letters there, God, even though you didn't come to know the Lord until age 7, God already had things mapped out for you, didn't he?
Absolutely.
So you're able to look back at your journey and go, yep, I can see how God worked here. This was, I don't even know how I made it through here, but God was there.
Oh, yeah.
And then a little bit later, I had these doubts and I was getting made fun of, and I have no idea how I survived that, but God was speaking to my heart and God sent people in. That's what's so encouraging for me, is that you have already pointed to so many different things, so many different tidbits in your life, some real big tidbits, other more minor tidbits, but they're all a part of your journey. Do you ever just sit there and ponder for a moment, or for an X amount, allotted period of time, and you just wonder, you just lift up your hands and go, there's no way that I could have written this script even on my own?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
Particularly around each anniversary of when my adoption comes, I just stop to think, wow, it's another year that I've experienced this, and I do tend to reflect back a lot of how this started, you know, from birth, you know, to having the crossed eyes and being brought here, and to going through everything that I went through here in the States. Yeah, I do, and I just sit and I go, okay, Lord, I got you. I see you. I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to just
And
take
just
each day and go with it.
And just think you're only 30.
I know. So what is he going to do in the next 30 years?
Right. Well, speaking of which, we're going to transition into that here in the coming time that we have with you here yet. But for now, we're going to play It Is Well by Christine DeMarco. And I want to encourage you, all of you out there listening, to keep it here, to keeping it real.
Grand earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know His name. And it is well with my soul. Sing it out. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. Sing it out. It is well. Oh, it is well. It is well with my soul. Because of who you are, Lord. Oh, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. Sing it out. It is well. It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well. It is and through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well, Lord. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well with me. try to fit you in the walls inside my mind. I try to keep you safely in between the lines. I try to put you in the box that I've designed. I try to pull you down so we are eye to eye. When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? I try to take life back right out of the hands of the king of the world. How could I make you so small when you're the one who holds it all? When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? Just a whisper of your voice contained the seas. So who am I to try to take the lead? Still I run ahead and think I'm strong enough, when you're the one who made me from that dust. When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? I try to take life back right out of the hands of the king of the world. How could I make you so small when you're the one who holds it all? When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? Ooh, you set it all in motion, every single moment. You brought it all to me, and you're holding on to me. When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? Try to take life back right out of the hands of the king of the world. How could I make you so small when you're the one who holds it all? When did I forget you've always been the king of the world?
Okay, and I am back here with Tatiana Harmer. I'm Ollie G, and this is Keeping It Real, of course. And Tatiana's been talking about God's personal plans for her life. In this edition of the show, again, last week we talked about adopted and blessed, which, of course, that is very much a part of these personal plans.
Yes.
Last week's show was kind of like a framework to build into this one. But all a part of your journey. And you just picked the song that we just heard from Natalie Grant, King of the World. I want to give you a chance to explain why you picked that song.
I love that song. I remember the first time I heard it, and I was just like, yes, that is me. I struggle with, and I think we all have struggled with wanting to put God in that box of what is comfortable for us and how we think he should be or what he should be doing for our lives. And she just reminds us to, when did I forget that, that you were the king of the world? And that brings me comfort too, in knowing that I can rest and stand back and say, I know that God has got this because he is the Lord of the universe. And if he can create the world, then he can certainly take care of me.
And what a good thing it is that God is not the God that we would want after our own imagination.
Oh, amen to that.
To think of how much he wouldn't be God then.
Oh, no. It'd be a big mess if it was.
I mean, so many people are like that, right? They want God in that box, or they want him to fit after their own imagination, not realizing that if they just took 2 seconds to look at themselves in their own spiritual mirror, it doesn't look too good.
Doesn't look good at all, no.
So, very cool answer for that song. And I'm a big Natalie Grant fan because she's got a set of pipes on her.
Yes,
That's
she does.
just unbelievable.
She's a powerhouse.
How has your background and all that happened in your life, how has that played a part in your relationships? Explain some of the difficulties maybe, or as well as some of the things that God has helped you overcome when it comes to your relationships?
So I think I appreciate relationships very deeply, whether or not it's I meet you for 10 minutes and we're in a coffee shop and we're just having a random conversation, or you're someone who's brought into my life for a season of a year, or you're someone who's been into my life for my entire life, like my parents. We're going on 26 years now. Yeah. And so I think I don't take for granted those relationships because I know how fragile and how quickly they can come and go. When I think of, for example, the children that I was in the orphanage with, I don't know that I'll ever see them again. For all I know, I've walked past them here in the States and I don't know.
Right.
But, you know, you just come to really appreciate the people that are brought into your life and for whatever purpose they serve. I think that's helped me overcome my fear of opening up. Sometimes that's, as much as I value relationships and friendships, I do tend to be closed off when you first meet me. Then once I figure I can trust you and you've broken down some of those walls, then you get to know me a little bit better. As I've gotten...
That's weird. I didn't see any wall. I mean, it was just like wide open.
Oh, well, I was just going to say...
I don't know, maybe if I just pushed it down or punched it down.
Well, as I've gotten older, too, I think I've realized that you just can't waste the time having those walls up. And the more real you are with people, the more likely well-received that's going to be, and the more likely that they're going to open up to you as well. So when I've gotten over the hurt of the things that I've dealt with in the past, and I stopped wearing that as like a badge of, you know, self-protection or self-preservation, and I finally could let that go, I was able to be more open, and for that I'm really grateful. But it took understanding how closed off I was and realizing how much I was dying inside that way to finally be able to let that go and live the way that I'm sure God has intended me to.
Okay, so that leads me then to my next question for you. Describe some of the joys and freedoms you have been able to experience in your long-distance dating relationship.
Yeah, long distance, all right.
Yeah, this gives you a chance now to kind of give us the framework of how long of a distance this is, how long has it been going for, how serious is it, what's the guy like, does he know what he's getting into?
I hope so, I don't know. So
what are some of the joys and freedoms just concerning your background, your life, all that you've gone through, where it's come to this point, and how does that all tie in or play a part now into this relationship?
All right, so a lot of elements to answer on that one.
Right.
So
it's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question,
not
so
simple.
here comes a loaded answer. So John and I met over 2 years ago, and we met online through eHarmony, which I swore up and down, left and right and diagonally, that I was never going to meet anybody through online dating. Well, you know, they say the best way to make God laugh is to tell him your plans, because he just took that and ran with it. And so we met and we started talking online, and on my profile I was very open about the fact that I was adopted and shared a little bit about my story, and that's part of what intrigued John into saying hi online and initiating the hello.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall watching that go down.
And it was not anything what I was expecting. At that point, I was in that season of my life where I was embracing singlehood. And once again, you know, God said, all right, well, you think you know what I've got going for your life, and here's a surprise. So John is Canadian. So we're working an international relationship. It is a 1,200-mile distance. So there's definitely been a lot of challenges in the long-distance relationship. Probably nothing what either one of us thought we were going. I don't think either one of us knew what we were getting ourselves into. However, I would
imagine not. It's not only that he's not just in another state; he's in another country.
Yeah, I mean, as close to America as you're going to get.
Yeah, right. I mean, at least he's not over in like Guam
London
or something,
or China or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and the really cool thing is he was very open to the fact that obviously I'm from the States and he's from Canada, and I said, you know, came out right from the beginning, you know, I get it if you don't want to even attempt this, because this is a lot to take on. I was also in my third round of applying for grad school, and I told him, hey, you know, I have worked 3+ years to get here, and I'm not giving this up for anybody, including you. Sorry, buddy. I know he came off like a total jerk, and he was like, that's okay. I'm totally in support of you going to school. I think it's great that you want to do this. So just throughout our relationship, to sum it up, he's been an amazing support and an encourager, not only in my dreams for grad school and, you know, eventually become a speech pathologist, eventually to get my doctorate, which will be years from down the road from now, but he's also been an amazing encourager in the faith. He is a believer. He's a son of 2 pastors, so he has been raised in the faith as well. And he's loving but firm and encouraging me and redirecting me to the word and pushing me towards the cross and he's not afraid to call me out when things need to be addressed. And so we have learned to be that for each other. We pray for each other. We do devotionals together, even if it's via Skype, because that's 90% of how we communicate with each other, except for when we visit. But it's been really neat, even knowing that the distance doesn't have to be a negative. And in that way, in so many ways, it's actually helped strengthen our relationship in ways that might be different than if you were just down the street, because we've had to face a lot of different challenges, not being able to see each other 24/7 and having to deal with issues immediately when they arise, and you can't let that kind of stuff, simmer. You have to address it, because you can't just take care of that right there.
It's just a really loaded answer. There's a number of things that I think of. First of all, the technology aspect of things.
Thank God for technology.
If you didn't have the technology, chances are not only would this never work, you never would have met. That's number one. Number two, biggest thing that went through my mind as you were emphasizing your answer was, what a model of a true man of God. If there's something that the church has been starving for, or that's virtually going into extinction in today's current time, is the telltale signs of a real man of God. And I don't use that phrase loosely. That stuff flies around out there all the time, but it's not really lived out. It's not carried out.
Right.
And if what you described is true, you just really described a real, there's the Proverbs 31 woman, right?
Yeah.
There's, a biblical man. And if he's supportive in that way, and prayer is such an emphasis, not in, again, these terms like prayer and encouraging one another and stuff like that, that's stuff that flies around a Sunday school classroom all the time. The way how you emphasized it, and again, what's so unfortunate about a radio show is that people don't get a chance to see your nonverbal cues.
Yeah.
But if they had a chance to see your facial expressions and your mannerisms, they would be able to gather that you are very passionate about this answer. Definitely a sign that you are in love.
Yes.
And a real substantiation, or in all likelihood, a confirmation that God is really at the center of what's going on between he and yourself. And I've never met him. I have no idea who he is. And I just have met you now over the last couple of weeks. But the fact that certain things like your pursuit of education was not a hindrance to him, what happened in your past is water off his back. And the fact that both of you are looking ahead with such passion concerning the faith, living life, doing life with Christ and in Christ together, it really means the world for your relationship.
Absolutely.
Certainly hope. Of course, it's a whole different ballgame when you put two sinners under one roof. And then,
and we're aware that it's going to be a whole new learning curve once we're married and living together.
But I believe that things will turn out A-okay.
I think so,
I have
too.
a funny feeling. Especially as long as God will be the king of your heart and the king of his heart.
Absolutely.
Which will lead us into this song, King of My Heart by Cutlass. Don't go anywhere, all of you out there listening, because we've got a lot more here with Tatiana Harmer as we wrap up this edition of Keeping It Real.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. to me. God is holding on. And when the night is holding on to me, God is holding on.
Okay, and we're back here on Keeping It Real, getting ready to make this edition of the show a wrap as we've been talking about personal plans, more specifically God's personal plans for Tatiana Harmer, as this week and last week has been about her journey. And I want to encourage you all to get onto www.kirradio.com, and on there is my YouTube channel. You can get onto any edition of the show, including Tatiana's 2 shows, in case you've missed any parts of any of these 2 shows. I can't urge you in any stronger terms than it's a must listen, because they have been loaded. They have been very impactful, as well as, all the other shows are on there as well from weeks gone by. A lot of information on that website for you to check out as well. Lots of really great sources as far as books and music and just information, general information regarding the show. Also, if you are a big social media person, I know a lot of you out there are, do a Keeping It Real search on Facebook. Up I pop up. And there are daily posts on Facebook. A lot of the posts are designed to encourage. Some of it's informational stuff. I just greatly encourage you to follow my page on Facebook. Also follow me on Twitter. I'm posting almost daily on Twitter as well. Sometimes just as something to throw out there to encourage folks. Or again, sometimes I use Twitter as an informational tool to get everybody cued in to what's going on with the show. Because this is a show unlike any other. This is not talk radio. And this isn't just a bunch of boring music. This is talk and music blended together, all tying in with a subject matter or topic that is very important, that a lot of you, if not all of you out there, are dealing with in one way or another. It's what I call where the rubber meets the road kind of issues. So I definitely encourage you to follow me, or more specifically, follow Keeping It Real on Facebook and Twitter, and to check out my website often to get all kinds of new info regarding the show. This show is sponsored by Cox Farm Service, which is located at 844 Catawissa Road out in the Lewistown Valley, just outside of Tamaqua. And if you've got any winter needs, we are in the heart of winter time, I know, but if you've looking for rock salt, ice melt, wood pellets, we've got all of those supplies on hand, and high quality stuff, I might add. Not cheap generic stuff. This is all stuff that's going to work or help you get through the winter the way you want to get through the winter. Okay, Tatiana, I've got one more question for you, and this is a very important question. Not only for you personally, I think, but for everyone out there listening. The subject of abuse is very important. It's something that's very near and dear to me. I was, I dealt with it emotionally growing up as a kid. And I remember a lot of the battle scars that I had to work through. I've known people that have been physically abused or sexually abused, or also verbally, emotionally abused. All kinds of unimaginable things going on in the name of abuse out there. You, as having been someone who has gone through it yourself, seriously, as a young child, what message do you have for people, young and old, who have been victims of abuse?
First of all, I wanted to say that I understand how you're feeling. Whatever stage you're in that healing process or coming to terms process or the grieving process, however you are dealing with it. And I understand going through that period of bitterness or anger or sadness or fear, but it doesn't have to define you, and it doesn't define you. You choose whether or not you remain that victim or you become someone who can overcome that. And it took me a long time. It took me 20 plus years to walk out of that prison that I had allowed myself to be walled into with the abuse, and deciding that I was not going to let that rule my life. I wasn't going to let the people that hurt me continue to hurt me all those years later. They don't know where I am. They probably don't even remember doing it. It doesn't matter to them at that point. And me being angry wasn't going to change the fact that it happened. It wasn't going to punish them. The only person that was being punished was me. So when I finally let that go, and I came to terms with that with myself and also within my faith, and acknowledging God's hand in that, as hard as it was, I cannot tell you how liberating it was to finally walk out that prison door and say goodbye to the anger and the bitterness. Yes, it is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. Yes, it is something that has shaped who I am. Yes, it is something that will continue to shape who I am. Relationships that I'm in now, future relationships, how I am as a mother with my children. All of that is going to shape who I am, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I'm going to let that be used for good so that I can be a victor over that abuse. And you can too, if you choose to allow yourself to do that, but it is a choice. And so I encourage you to, if you're hurting and you're not sure how to handle it, don't be like me and hold it in for 20 plus years. Go and seek help. I don't care if it's a friend, a pastor, a professional counselor, whoever it is, get someone to sit and listen to you. I promise you, they're not going to judge you, and you're going to feel so much better by just getting that off your chest and dealing with it right then and there.
Oh, well, that's well put. And I tell you what, keeping it real actually serves as that kind of outlet as well.
Absolutely.
For anyone out there, if you are being abused or going through the process of being abused, or you have been a victim or been at the hands of suffering from abuse, we're here to help. I've got a direct access line to Tatiana, who probably is as qualified as anyone to help someone in need, being the fact that she's really gone through the ringer herself concerning this very heartfelt subject. Thank you so much for coming on. I think of that scripture, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And I think that was the heartbeat of your response there. And when I think of the good or the goodness that comes with God and from having a personal relationship with God, I think of this tune that we're going to get ready to play by Colton Dixon called All Matters. The real emphasis or the real heartbeat of this song, I think, is that. Because when you peel everything away, you kind of brush everything to the side. If all you have is God, that's all that matters.
Amen.
And I think that's where you've been on, the track you've been on, especially here in the last 5 years, where you have really gained a lot of victory in your life. You're going to come back on again, right?
Absolutely.
All right. This is fun.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
It's fun,
great.
even though it's serious and it's funny, and we're able to have a good time, laugh, and be joyful, but also the most important thing, to really address these things in the Spirit of the Lord and really look to make a difference for people and in people's lives out there that may be listening. God bless you all real good. Here is Colton Dixon.
I've tasted hopelessness, I know what heartache is, but somehow through all of it, your love remains. I've lived through brokenness, feeling faceless, but I'm not anonymous, you know my name. Your word is a light unto my feet, your love is my identity. All that matters is you make all things new. There's no disaster that you cannot undo. This world will fade and life will change. All of this is true, but all that matters is that I matter to you. you're for me for always.
You've been listening to Keeping It Real, hosted by Ollie Gann. Keeping It Real is brought to you by Cuck's Farm Service. Join Ollie G Sunday mornings 8:30 to 9:30 right here on Magic 105.5 WMGH.